I will do a quick roundup of my speakers I have with me here today for this diversity and inclusion related panel discussion, which is titled as an ongoing discussion, which has been put forward about 4, 5, maybe 6 years ago. I have with me Iris Den Boer, Head of Responsible Gaming at BetCity.nl, Helen Walton, Chief Commercial Officer at G Games, Oliver Niner, Head of Sales at PandaScore, Robin MacDonald, co-founder and managing partner at Rubik Talent. In the meantime, Oliver, I just want to say that our podcast is now also trending because it has gone live this morning.
I saw that.
All right, so let's do a quick introduction. Each of you could say a few words about their career and what they are doing now. So let's start with Iris, Helen, Oliver, and Robin.
Thank you. So my name is Iris Den Boer. I live in Holland, and I'm the head of responsible gaming for BetCity. And yeah, we've met before, Zoltán. We've done previous recordings together. So yeah, I think that's for my introduction as for my role and my position and where I'm located at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Helen.
Hi, so I'm Helen Walton. I'm one of the founders at G and the Chief Commercial Officer. And before entering iGaming, I had a career in FMCG, retail, and publishing and marketing. And so the reason I'm interested in this topic is because when I first entered the iGaming industry, I was quite literally horrified by how lacking in diversity it was. Not so much in terms of background or in terms of it being a very international industry, but I was truly horrified by its lack of diversity in terms of gender and many of its attitudes around gender.
We'll touch base on that. Oliver.
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name is Oliver Niner. I'm currently head of sales at PandaScore. I've been in the industry for 15 years through various B2B and B2C companies. Touching on a bit what kind of like as Helen said, my interest in this is personal. I am visually impaired, so I have a physical disability. In terms of diversity, I'm very, very interested to contribute my thoughts into how the industry plays out for people with disabilities, because I don't think there's too much there at the moment. And for what it's worth, this is the first time I'm openly saying that to people in the industry as well.
Thank you so much, Oliver. Robin.
Good morning, Zoltán. Good morning, panel. Thank you for having me on the panel. I'm founder of Rubik Talent. I've spent the last decade helping young people into careers, and that's across technology, sales, and recruitment. At Rubik Talent, we have a particular focus on helping to fill the digital skills gap and even more acute focus on helping to support teams grow in a way that supports diversity and inclusion. And so we work right across the industry with diversity groups in order to help our clients build technology and sales teams with diversity and inclusion at their heart.
Okay, thank you very, very much. Yeah, so when we started this series of panel discussion, I think it was in 2018 in Prague, we were the first ones to touch base not only on gender equality, we also touched base like disabilities, like Oliver said, and we also touched based on sexual orientation, regional problems like coming from minorities. For instance, I can tell you this personally that I had this type of issue. Our family had this type of issue when we once moved to London and collided with this issue being from Eastern Europe when trying to get hired. So basically nowadays I have companies that for which I was doing an interview are coming to our conferences. So it all turned out well, but it was a situation which I will never forget. And I like to talk about this in terms of diversity and inclusion as well, not just the gender part. So as an opening question for everyone, has progress been made in the areas of diversity and inclusion over the past 2 to 5 years? And maybe can you give an example of a significant step forward? We will start with Iris, Helen, Oliver, and then Robin.
Thank you. So yeah, with regards to progress that has been made towards this topic in our industry, I think that a lot of progress that we can see is the progress that's really loud and celebrated. So there's a lot of, for example, awards rewarded to, for example, women specifically. And it started off with women celebrating each other and their success in the industry and in different industries as well. And then this is expanding to recognitions and awards for other kinds of nominations where we are celebrating each other's differences and also celebrating inclusion and valuing each other. So yeah, this is, I think, an example of a way that we can see that initially it was a very careful process where the awards were smaller and the crowds were smaller and the celebrations were smaller. And then you saw a trend of a lot of articles that are really celebrating people's differences and the way that companies and workforces now approach this topic. So I think it's a very positive change that we've been seeing, and it's only expanding. And it's also it's not just the gaming industry. I think it's across a lot of industries where we see this this trend, and I think it's great to observe that.
Okay, thank you, Helen.
I mean, I'd also say we've definitely made a lot of progress and we've definitely come a long way. But I also want to be clear that that's because we were starting from such a low bar. I mean, the iGaming industry was truly atrocious 8 or 9 years ago. Bad incidents still happen, but nowadays we're all shocked and upset by them. Whereas 9 years ago, you were essentially told off if you even tried to mention it. So I got publicly uninvited from a conference because I objected to the pole dancers that were in the conference. And I think, I would no longer be uninvited. I might be asked not to say it publicly anymore. And I understand that because that's commercial reality. But yeah, we've come a long way, but it was from a low bar. I think we've got a lot further to go. And I also take Iris's point that that's partly because as a society, we feel like we have a lot further to go and we're interested in a lot of things that are happening. One of the things I do just want to touch on that I've always thought that the iGaming industry is really good at offering good access to people from different backgrounds. So there are not that many industries where I think you can see quite large numbers of senior staff coming through who don't have, for example, a traditional degree, but who have kind of come through the shop floor in retail or in bricks and mortar casinos. And one of the things I'm very keen is to ensure that in embracing greater diversity of different types of background and of gender, that we don't ignore that type of socioeconomic diversity as well. I would be very sorry to see the iGaming industry lose that.
Okay, thank you so much. Oliver.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I'm only going to talk really about disability inclusion. The rest of the panel can speak on a lot better things in terms of gender equality and other kind of areas. But from disability, no, it's terrible. It's still, you don't see, I could probably count on one finger the amount of people I've seen in wheelchairs at conferences. And from personal experience, no, I have not actively had any discrimination against me, but that's because I wear a disguise. So the fact that it's taken me to this point to actually come, one of a better word, come out and say I have a physical disability is not a good sign. It's not a good thing. Yeah. So from that side of things, the iGaming industry should look at itself and kind of say, are we embracing and are we open to people? Are we accessible? Do we feel that we are allowing people from all types of backgrounds, and that includes backgrounds where people have suffered difficulties physically, or there's hidden disabilities as well, which are coming to more kind of more prominence these days. So from that perspective, no, there's still a lot to do. There's a lot to do in terms of accessibility, in terms of things, in terms of making people feel comfortable, in terms of image, these different things. So I think from that perspective, that we've got to do a lot better.
Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing everything about yourself. It's really an honor for this exclusive
the second exclusive I'm giving you, mate, honestly.
Robin.
Wait, can I just echo your thoughts, Zoltán, on commending Oliver for his open discussion and bringing this topic around disability inclusion to the fore. That's great. And I'd like to echo Helen's thoughts in regards to where the iGaming industry has come from. It has come from a very, I think, low place in regards to diversity and inclusion. And it is looking at industries around it, payments, fintech, regulated industries, where success for companies is hindered on on those organizations having a diversity and inclusion culture within them. So if you look at some of the larger organizations like Entain and Sky Sports Betting, they've all got diversity and inclusion programs, which they're quite publicly shouting about. And I think that's a real benefit to the industry generally. And I think it's going on the right trajectory. But I think to Helen's point, it is absolutely come from a very difficult place. And so it's slow moving, shall we say. And I think to Iris's point around award ceremonies, and it's great to see diversity and inclusion awards, but you look at some of the panels, and I won't name names, but some of the award shows, their panels aren't particularly diverse. They it's the same people who are running these things, and it becomes difficult to change an industry when you have that ingrained culture in it. So we see an opportunity to Rubik, for example, to bring in young people into the industry. And what we want to do is to show them an inclusive culture, so that people who come from different groups, underrepresented groups, are able to and want to join an industry and don't have the fear of joining something only to be shunned, if you like. So to answer the question, I think it's come leaps and bounds, but I think it's still got a long way to go, and then there's still needs to be some open discussions around when things do go wrong.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to be the devil's advocate over here and ask you a question. Don't name any companies, but do you think that maybe for some companies just HR PR stunt?
There's always that risk, I think, and it's only once you start to dig under the covers and talk to the leadership within those organizations where you see whether the organization is actually embracing diversity and inclusion. I do think, though, if organizations are espousing that they are open and bringing on different types of people and different skills into their organization, if they're only doing it on the surface, they will get called out pretty quickly, and it will it'll be paper thin, and it will be seen as such.
Yeah, because
especially with the amount of pressure on organizations to act in appropriate ways these days, because of the wider things that are going on in society.
Yeah, and going back to the gender thing, that here in Eastern Europe, there wasn't such a big problem as it was in Western societies. But in regards to other types of diversity, it's really a problem which is going on nowadays, and it's being fueled by politics and everything. So, yeah, okay. So, what or who is the driving force behind the progress that has been made? Because you all shared that there has been some progress. We can go the same way.
Sure. So I think personally that role models play a really big part. As Robin mentioned, awards, he says there's always maybe the same jury or perhaps the same people being nominated for the same reasons. But I think that of course, anyone who was awarded should still be proud and, probably still really made an effort towards the way that, for example, women in the industry are being perceived. I think that just the fact that there's a platform that wants to address this or that wants to put this in a spotlight, I think that makes a huge difference. So also in terms of role models, I think that I'm very conscious of my position in the company, in the industry. It's not the case that there isn't a lot of women in iGaming. There's a lot of women in tech now. There's a lot of women in different fields. But it's not that long ago that there wasn't. So I think that in terms of addressing diversity in a very positive way, addressing, valuing each other's opinions, and recognizing each other's differences with acceptance, I think is very, very important. And it's an ongoing topic. It's not something that is just a change in mindset or just because HR decided that this is now our strategy, that this is now all of a sudden also a company culture. This is something that needs to really grow. So yeah, I do feel that, the role models that we see, the articles that are being posted of women in high ranking positions, they're really paving a way for younger generations. They already have done this a lot, and I support this. I feel conscious of this responsibility, and I do everything in my power basically to see that whenever there is an opportunity to promote this topic. Of course, I'm talking here from my point of view, and the reason why I was asked to join this panel discussion and speak on behalf of the minority point of view of being a woman in the industry. But yeah, I mean, there's also, of course, the other topics that come forward here in this panel discussion. But for myself personally, as an answer to your question, I think that role models played a big part, and I'm really glad to now continue this myself in this journey.
Thank you. Role models such as Helen.
Exactly.
So, obviously there are a mixture of external and internal factors that have driven change. I think as the iGaming industry has become regulated, I think there have been a set of pressures that are more broadly around responsibility, CSR, good governance, and having kind of diversity in your leadership and in your intake is part of that. And along with that also comes the very real pressure of being able to recruit the best talent. And the gambling industry has enough of a reputational challenge in recruitment, full stop, without making its life that much harder by attempting to exclude, whether consciously or unconsciously, 52% of the population. I often say when I'm attending these kind of things, I'm not a minority, I'm the majority. I'm 52% of the population. It's not my fault if your recruitment does not reflect that. That's definitely your fault and something you should be looking at. And the same is true of BAME backgrounds in London. That's those graduating from university in London is 23% of the population is BAME backgrounds. If your recruitment isn't reflecting that, again, it suggests that you have a problem in your recruitment. So there's this, more generally, how are we being perceived, and very specifically a self-interested drive to ensure that we stay up to date with where we should be in terms of recruitment and retention. And nobody who works in this industry doesn't believe that we have a challenge in recruitment and retention.
Good point. Oliver.
Yeah, I think I echo the point about role models. I think and that comes to the point about the industry being accessible in terms, or perceptively accessible. I also think that, prejudice comes from a lack of understanding about what strengths and weaknesses come from certain situations. From a disability perspective, people get ruled out because on a very, very basic level, rather than actually looking at the counterbalance of what someone can achieve. It's not even what they can achieve in spite of that. Actually, what having any given disability can mean that you do more than someone else. So it actually adds to a skill set. The level of determination that I observe other people, I have friends who have disabilities. I work with disability charities, and I see the skill sets that are available there. And I think actually that's incumbent on recruitment processes and HR departments to actually understand that there's a talent pool there of skill sets which isn't being used. And kind of with that as well, it's a sense of really understanding. I mean, again, from personal experience, and that's all I can draw on, is the fact that I've done sales roles, I've done operational roles, I've lived in different countries, I've overcome challenges which perceptively people, and I have been told this directly from people, they have had doubts that I could do based on my disability, and I have done them. And that's not because I'm special, that's because I have determination, I have a certain number of skill sets in order to do those. And that's no different to anyone else with a disability. Where I'm lucky is that it's not obvious. So when you can say to someone, by the way, I have this difficulty, but I still can do this, then it's easier to convince them to do that. But you still have to convince them. And that's the issue. With people who have more obvious disabilities, I don't know what their life is like. And actually, to be honest, I dread to think about it. Whether they just get dismissed out of hand, I can't comment on it. But that would be my fear, given my experience of the industry so far. And I have worked for some great companies who have backed me fully, but I still have people kind of question my ability to do things.
Yeah, well, certainly you are proving this as a role model today, as we have about.
And it's part of the reason I'm doing this.
600 viewers on YouTube right now, and the podcast on Spotify is already trending. So we are definitely going to have many people being inspired.
I completely echo, and that's the point. I'm not doing this for me. This is for other people.
Zoltán, can I ask a follow-up of Oliver, if you don't mind? Oliver, I was just wondering, how do you feel that the move, because of the pandemic and move to remote working, has that benefited people with disabilities, do you think?
This would be pure speculation. Possibly, yes. I would be very interested once we get out. I mean, I work in sales as well, so we're at trade shows all the time and things, and that's the piece where I haven't been able to see. But it's not, again, and again, there were probably companies where there were people with disabilities doing lots of different roles, and this is the outward perception that I have, being doing the commercial kind of focus of things. But it would be a guess, but I would say yes, it probably has helped people because they don't feel that they have to put themselves out there so much. They don't have to throw their disability out and say and invite judgment.
Yeah. It's interesting. The proof will be in the pudding, I think, once the pandemic hopefully continues to wane. From my perspective, finding role models from diverse backgrounds is a generational challenge, because it's only once you invite the new generation in and they filter up into senior positions that these role models will actually become figureheads for the industry, to Iris's point. And it's important to get those recruitment practices correct and right, and to include 23% BAME hires in your London recruiting. Yeah, absolutely, your team should reflect the wider society, and if it's not, you should probably be asking yourself, why not? And it's been proven that those organizations whose employees are representative of the wider population are actually better at developing products for the wider market, and so there's very specific market reasons why you should be doing this. It's not just for happy, feely, good times. It's for very specific market reasons that you should be going on to this journey. In addition to that, you've got the gambling industry, which is now being seen more as an entertainment vehicle as it starts to liberalize through North America, and you have partnerships with likes of Meta and other gaming types of organizations. I think the gambling industry is going to go through a huge change over the next 5-10 years, and it will be those who do embrace these new ways of hiring at the junior end, if you like, that will see success.
So you all pointed out, and we all know that more can be done when it comes to diversity and inclusion. But can you give a specific example? How can change be made? Same round.
Sure. I think that change can be made, of course, from within individual organizations. So any organization that chooses an approach that embraces diversity and translates this into in a way that the company culture is, so people understanding each other and also, I suppose, really living the strategy basically, or whatever they've decided for diversity and inclusion, what it should look like for their company, or what it does look like. Because I guess, you know, it's about finding value in the strategy, then translating it into understanding how to roll this out through your company, and to how to explain to everyone what this behavior is. What does this behavior look like? Because we can all describe diversity and inclusion, but what does it mean on a day-to-day basis? Working with your colleagues and showing up in a boardroom or doing a presentation where you are maybe a minority in that room. So, you know, for people to understand how that must perhaps feel to you, to be aware of that. And then to find a way to work together in such a way that it's not something that matters anymore. And I think that it's something that we're all very aware of, but not everyone is sure how to approach it or how to practice this. So I think that there is a lot to accomplish in just training and examples, and also trying to get across a point of view of another person, or to explain how they may feel in a certain situation, or how it may be different for them, or they may already have the idea that there's prejudice, or that they're perceived in a certain way that other people maybe aren't even aware of. So I think that is just very important to just be conscious, and to bring forward this consciousness across the company.
Okay.
I think I agree that you really have to look at your policies and your processes. And I think one of the things we should always be doing is looking to other industries to look at what best practice is in other places and take inspiration from them. And I remember a couple of groups that I've looked at in the past and I've been very impressed by. Places for People, which was a housing association, have a really excellent apprentice scheme. I'm a big fan of apprentice schemes. I'm a big fan of bringing in socioeconomic diversity and finding ways to bring people into the industry who might not previously find their way through. GCHQ, Oliver, you just made me think about it, because they have a really interesting neurodiversity program where they have specific kind of neurodiversity support groups within the organization, which are just monthly meetups where people can feel supported and to talk and communicate in a particular way. And they also have quite a large focus actually on disability support in a way that I was very impressed by when I spoke to them. And the reason I'm saying you have to look at different industries is because what works for your specific company will often be quite different. And I see Robert's just put a question into the chat window that I think is really relevant. Is it easier or harder to be inclusive in a remote company? And I think that the point is it's different. So some types of inclusivity are much easier remotely, but you can be blindsided. We're a fully remote company and have been since long before the pandemic. But you can be blindsided by things that you weren't expecting. We discovered that it was far easier actually to get strangely paranoid. You believed that little cliques were forming around people who did go out for coffee in person once a month just because they wanted to. But the rest of you who weren't doing that felt weirdly excluded. So there will... People are by their nature tribal and occasionally exclusive. That's how we kind of work. And so continually refining and changing and learning your policies and your processes. And as Iris says, that's much harder thing of continually refining yourself and your own views and expectations and prejudices. There's no one silver bullet. You always need to be looking more broadly and continually improving.
Thank you. Ollie.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said here. And I think, so there's one thing which crosses over from what Robin said about I'm very, very interested to see from disability how, I know there are problems still, but the US has got a much more healthy inclusivity culture at the corporate level than actually a lot of European countries do. So I'm very interested to see how that culture kind of then influences the more old school kind of gambling sector. So that's going to be quite interesting for me. The other point as well is I agree. I think for me it's very deep culturally. I think companies need to ask themselves this at every level when they're promoting people, when they're recruiting people. They have to ask themselves, what prejudices am I bringing into this? Because people always bring prejudices, and actually have some self-analysis and self-discipline and self-thought about. You can't. I agree with what Helen says. You can be very navel-gazing. You can overthink things. You can. But I think there's a simplicity to, am I judging that a person can do this job based on their ability to do this job, or am I bringing something else into the room from elsewhere? And that could be race, that could be gender, that could be disability, that could be background. And if a company is open and honest about those things, then they can educate. I'd say bring it out into the open, really. That's my point. If there is prejudice, then understand that prejudice. Don't try and kind of overcome that by kind of overcompensating, saying, well, we are inclusive and we do all these things. And you can whitewash these things. I think it is actually better to understand where prejudice in these areas comes from. Is there an education piece? I have spent a lot of time telling people, well, you can't do that because you can't see it. Actually, no, I can do it because I can do these things, but I would like you to help. And that's, you have to understand that comes from, again, confidence in the industry and a longer career. But there are people at the start of that who won't necessarily be able to kind of say, actually, I need this amount of help and to do this, and then I can do what you expect me to do, and I can do it better than this person. That's the area. That's the holy grail where we want to be in terms of disability, in my opinion.
You have to be motivated and given a chance.
Give everyone a chance.
No.
That's the point.
Robbie.
To follow on from Oliver, I think there's real difficulty if you have those problems in your organization and accepting that you are biased, and especially at the top, there's a real lack of interest in actually talking about it, and it takes, again, generations for these types of behaviors to change within organizations, and so accepting you have that bias in a corporate culture when you're in senior management is probably not something that most people would do. One of the ways I've seen in some of the organizations that I've worked for previously have changed for the positive is actually just to pick a particular program or topic or something that's close to your heart to introduce the topic in a positive way, be it supporting women into different types of roles in for technology that's particularly relevant for us, people from different backgrounds, or raising money for a particular cause or organization. And once you start to introduce those types of conversations into the corporate culture, then they can have a snowball effect because more people will want to get involved, and you'll see the positive ramifications of that.
Just a tiny point, though, is that I think we should all be conscious that it can be quite risky to talk openly and honestly about one's own prejudices, because we are in quite a censorious and judgmental worldview at the moment, where admitting that you've got something wrong can get you jumped on very publicly and very embarrassingly and difficultly. And I think we should, have the kind of commercial awareness to know that can be hard, and to figure out how we work with and around that.
All right, so I will throw you guys a trick question now. What is, in your definition, diversity and inclusion? What does that mean to you personally? Iris.
Yeah. I think it's a lot to me about empowering people and appreciating their differences. I think that for me, if I had to explain it, I think it would be to see each other's differences, but not treat each other differently. I think that for me is a big thing. To always as much as possible, just unapologetically be yourself in whichever industry you work, in whichever position you work. Of course, bring your best professional self to work, but never forget to be you. And I think that the more people start to embrace that and carry that, the more it reflects on diversity and inclusion. I think it just starts within yourself to try to bring that forward and to bring that to work and to bring that to your industry. And then I think that that is a way to position as a role model and to bring across diversity and inclusion.
If you're not an evil person by nature.
If you're not, no.
All right, Helen.
I think I would go with a straightforward question about, does your company makeup reflect the society around you? And if not, why not? There might be some really good reasons, but there might not be. And the follow-on to that, obviously, is Oliver's point, which is that, are you enabling access? Or are you perhaps entirely unconsciously placing barriers in the way that are the reason why your company makeup does not reflect your society's makeup?
Great. Ollie.
Really simple, just equal opportunity. The opportunity, so that everyone starts from zero.
Yeah. That's
it. Not from -5.
It's a short and strong message right there. Robin.
It's a little bit different. I think the diversity is different than inclusion. And it's always important, I think, to remember that in order to have diversity, you actually have to have an inclusive culture in the first instance. Because if you try and go out and hire diversity and you don't have an inclusive culture, you'll end up failing. And that could be, death by 1,000 knives, because the people you try to bring into your organization are ultimately not successful, and they will leave. So I think it's important to distinguish the two. But if you do get them both right, you get the third part, which is equality, and that's ultimately the goal.
Okay, so I think everyone has most probably different backgrounds. They haven't started directly in the gambling industry. So I would like to ask, how does the gambling industry compare to others when it comes to diversity and inclusion?
So I think that as even Helen also addressed in the beginning, was that a lot has changed in the gambling industry. There's still a long way to go, but it's not what it was a couple of years ago. So with regards to that, I don't think that the gambling industry is doing bad at all. So in comparison to others, I wouldn't say exactly, it depends which industry, but as a general view on this industry, I think there's a lot of steps made forward and a lot of new strategies that show very well that this is also working, that this approach, that there's a lot of groups of women in tech and all sort of initiatives that promote and support these ideas. So yeah.
I mean, I think we're terrible. I think we're really awful. And yes, I think we maybe are getting better. But the last time I checked, which admittedly was about a year ago, we had fewer women on boards than the finance industry. And certainly when you look at the numbers, just to take it very UK focused for a moment, when you look at the numbers of PML holders who are women or who are from BAME backgrounds, I mean, it is minute. And at some point you have to look at the hard figures and not just the, are we trying and do we think we're doing something? And yeah, so I think we're pretty bad. But as I say, I do think there are a couple of bright spots in the gambling industry that we should be proud of. And the first is that I think our internationalism is an incredibly positive thing. I think the fact that at any gambling conference you go to, you will be meeting a really large number of people from different countries. It is not all UK, US and Netherlands in the senior leadership positions. And that certainly is true of some other industries that I have worked in. So that's good. And the second thing that I think is good is that traditionally we have had a large number of people without traditional university backgrounds. Indeed, one of my fears, weirdly, is that as we professionalize, we might lose that and that we might become a much more oh yes, we're just going to have lots of nice middle-class people with Russell Group University degrees. And I think that would be a true loss. And I hope that we remain focused on thinking about broader forms of diversity and access.
Okay, thank you. Ollie?
So I love this industry. I've had the best time working in this industry for the over 15 years I've done it, and I've worked for some amazing companies, and they haven't held me back personally with the disability that I have. And I love my current company, and they're happy for me to push on this platform. So in terms of the industry, I can reflect really well on it. I think we're starting from, in terms of disability, we're starting now. And I really want to echo what Helen said as well. I actually think one of the reasons that I have been able to do what I've done is because of the nature, is because of that inclusivity. It's because the industry, by hook or by crook, has invited people from different backgrounds, and there is that ability to fight. I think there is a methodology there that we can all learn from and realize how the industry can become more accepting and open to greater talent pools and people from different backgrounds and people with different difficulties and people from different genders. This is something we can learn from, and I think it's important that the conversations like this allow us to do this, to actually say, this is a great benefit to us, and it actually creates growth and agility and all the wonderful things that we want when we're growing and building companies. But there is a huge amount to do, because like I said, I think that most people with disabilities in this industry are ghosts. You don't see them, or they're not there. So that's a problem.
Okay. Robin?
I'd largely echo what Helen has said, and specifically around the internationalism brings, both good and bad, I think, to the table, because you have different markets within that internationalism, which bring very different cultural backgrounds that may or may not promote diversity and inclusion. But the fact is that through that international community is actually also the solution to that very specific problem. So largely I'm in agreement, I think, with what Helen was saying.
I like how everybody is agreeing with everybody in this panel. Okay, so another interesting question, which I like to ask during responsible gaming related panel discussions, is what are the long-term consequences if we ignore diversity and inclusion?
Right. Long-term consequences if we ignore, well, the thing is that...
Or it cannot be ignored anymore.
No, it cannot be ignored. It shouldn't be ignored for sure. And I think that's the thing that I'm glad about, that the trend came up with promoting all these initiatives for inclusion and celebrating each other's differences. I think that, that's why I really appreciate this coming forward. As it's kind of like a whirlwind where, it started as a small breeze and it's just building larger, and it's becoming a hurricane basically. And it's something that cannot be ignored anymore. And I think that's what I'm really grateful for. And that's why I'm also very positive about the outlook in the future for this topic. I can't speak really for all minority groups, but as for women in the industry, I think for long-term perspective, I think that it is very positive. As I said, I'm looking up to role models that were an example to me, and I'm hoping to be a role model to a younger generation. And I think that it matters whether there's visibility. If you are there in a certain position and people see you there and people know that you're there, then it matters that you're representing this group of minority, and that people know that it's possible to accomplish this. So that's what I want to do. I want to be on webinars, and I want to show up, and I want to be here for people to see that this is very important to be a part of this discussion and to carry it forward.
Thank you. Helen.
Listen, if we don't improve our diversity, we will have a shrinking talent pool and we will have rising costs. We already pay well over the average on a per salary basis in this industry. And I think that is entirely linked to our difficulties in recruiting from outside the industry. That alone should be enough to be terrifying everyone into taking it unbelievably seriously. But I think the second point is a moral point, is that all of us know that none of us want to be sexist, racist, ableist. Nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, that's the person I want to be this morning.
No, I'm not sure about that. Maybe there are some.
They tell themselves a story so that they're not saying that's what they are. But, if that's how we feel as moral individuals, we need to bring our whole selves to work. And if we don't, if we encourage some kind of division between the person I am at home and the person I am in the office and at work, that is how bad behaviors occur at work, the kinds of bad behaviors that are company-ending events. And I always say you don't have to look just within the gambling industry to see things that can cause a regulator to shut down a company or to see it fined out of existence. You can look at mechanical engineers who were cheating on emissions because they weren't bringing their whole selves to work. They were doing something that they knew to be immoral because of various pressures that they were under. And I think that is what we should understand, all of us, that we are our whole selves and we want to be that person in the office just as we are at home. And if we don't, we will see our industry collapse, and arguably so it should.
Thank you. Ollie.
I think, to add what the guys have said here is, I think that we work in an industry where there is, where morality is questioned daily about what we do. And, I do it in groups of, in my personal groups, I've had, funny anecdotes. I've had a couple of dates in my past of where people have walked out on me because I work in gambling. Actually walked up and left the room. And I think we have to kind of accept that it becomes more and more difficult if, as Helen said, if we're not joining as our whole selves in this, with our work and our personal lives, it becomes very difficult to then, speak with a moral and a kind of authoritative voice outside of the gambling industry about what we're doing and about the merits of our industry, which there are many. So I think that's a danger. I also, to be positive, I actually think there's a lot of momentum. I do think, as Iris said, the cat's out of the bag. The fact that you guys have had these conversations for the period of time that you have has given me the confidence to come forward and talk about disability. So there is obviously a momentum here, and I think, and long may that continue. So I think that there are dangers. Yes, we would lack the moral authority that we need in order to kind of keep our industry justifiably going. And also, but I think we're making progress anyway.
Great point, Robin.
Just on that, I think you ignore taking gambling as responsibly at your peril. And as it gets closer and closer linked to the entertainment industry, that's just going to continue to push the fact that the responsibility of the industry very much lies in itself in order to succeed, or it will be swallowed up. And in regards to the talent attraction element and attracting people into the industry, there's 1 million job vacancies for technologists across Europe and across different industries, and the same is true in the United States. And now you've just regulated the industry right across North America, and you want to keep pace and attract more people in. And the only way you're going to do that is if you start to talk to and approach and entice different groups from different backgrounds into careers that they hadn't considered before. And there's a very, very good mandate and story to tell if you get it right.
For the past 2-3 years, we have been active in more industry, not just the gambling industry. We are also doing conferences for artificial intelligence, fintech, blockchain, so on. We have been connecting these industries together throughout some conferences, and we have been sharing these type of discussions. So my next question would be, as someone from a minority or majority background. What has been your personal experience working in the industry? I will be switching off my video for 1 minute, but you guys can answer in the meantime. Iris?
Thank you. So with regards to my personal experience, I have, of course, good and bad experiences as expected, I suppose. And you know, it's always a little bit difficult to pinpoint whether it's a bad experience because of self-limiting beliefs or because there is really and truly some prejudice or something to that extent at play. So it is very difficult to know per se when you're being affected negatively because of perhaps different perceptions towards your minority group or the group that you're maybe representing in a certain position in a certain industry, or whether it's actually a matter of a company culture where you're just experiencing some sort of discrimination, perhaps to some extent, or being treated differently. So, you know, it's always difficult to know for sure. And I think that's why it's a very important discussion, because there's a lot of elements of people being treated differently that are not very visible, or not very out there, not very very clear, let's say. So it's always important to continue this discussion, to understand how something may affect someone of a certain minority group that others may not even be aware of. So I was sometimes aware of the way that I was approached, but I wasn't always 100% sure whether it had to do with being a minority group or not. So I think that it's a very interesting discussion around that to bring forward, to just always be aware of how you approach someone else and how you would like to be approached. So I think that's the thing. How you would like to be approached is how you approach another person also. So that's my experience. So there's some good, there's some bad, there's some doubtful situations where you're just not sure what it's about. But I think overall, I'm positive, you know, about my experiences. But I think it's also good to use them as a learning curve and to bring them forward for relevance for future generations and as examples for ways maybe not to approach certain situations or people.
I'll just come out and say I've never experienced so many obvious and glaring examples of sexism as I have in the gambling industry. That's whether I've had somebody asking if I was my co-founder's secretary. I've been presenting at ICE and had the person I was presenting to turn to the junior developer standing next to me and ask if he was the brains of the company. You know, I've seen things that have horrified me that I've never seen in any other industry, and I've had my beautiful and charming account managers suffer completely unwanted sexual advances that they have struggled to deal with, and that has happened. I'm not going to say that's never happened or I've never seen that happen in other industries. I'm just going to say it's happened with higher frequency and has been more shrugged off as normal in this industry. So no, I'm going to say I've come across a great deal of it, and I think it is difficult to call out that behavior. And I know people who know me might find that surprising, but it is hard to call it out, especially when you're a supplier and especially when you are reliant on being viewed as charming, helpful, and generally a nice person to hang out with. It is very hard to call out bad behavior in those circumstances. And that's why all of us as an industry should come together to call it out collectively.
All right, so Oliver, before you answer, I would like to ask the audience here on Zoom, if anybody would like to share their experience, they can just send me a message and can come online, because this is an open discussion for everyone. So Oliver?
So in terms of comparing the gambling industry to other industries, I think, so to be brutally honest, when growing up before I entered into the gambling industry with a visual disability, the tendency was always to say that you could go into certain professions. So you were sort of siloed. and say that this is where you're going to go. You can either do, I mean, the old joke, particularly, I have a visual disability. I'm registered blind. Okay. So the old joke was blind people are only piano tuners and typists. That was an old kind of adage. So the world out there is much worse than the world in the gambling industry for disability, I think, in certain areas, and with certain things. But again, I have experienced, people openly saying you can't do that, and I've had anecdotal people, managers telling me of managers above me, at one company I was saying he can't do that because, are we keeping him because we feel sorry for him? This kind of thing, because he can't do this because of his disability. So, there have been negative things, but there've also been. But again, I'll come back to this point about the gambling industry being very empowering. And again, I'm restricting myself. I've again, to echo what Helen said, I've got I've worked with women in the industry, and I've got a woman in my team, and she's incredibly competent, and I'm actually horrified at some of the things that she goes through when I go to events with her. So. I think there are obvious things where it's bad compared to other walks of life. But with disability, I think it's very early. I think it's very, I don't think we have enough. I don't think apart from my own experience, I don't have too much in the way of anecdotal evidence. I'd love to hear from other people's experiences in terms of disability to know how other people have found it as well.
It will definitely be included in our next talk. Robin.
Not a lot for myself. I'm not personally a minority, of course, but I am building an organization that supports diversity into the gambling industry. So it's important for me to one, build our own culture in the way in which the panel has been discussing, but two, also to look at who we're working with and understand whether they're the right clients for us or they're the right partner for us. So that we can build an ecosystem that is supportive for our own employees.
Okay, so we still have a lot of time left, and I have some more questions for you in terms of implementing diversity inclusions. I don't know if all of you have been doing this. Most probably Oliver hasn't. What would you say is the most difficult part of implementing a diversity and inclusion program in a company?
I think that the most difficult part is to get across what diversity inclusion is and what it isn't. So, of course, you would like to have a policy to hire people that fit into the scope of diversity and inclusion. But at the same time, it means that everyone should qualify. And that we shouldn't judge people for anything and say that this certain group of people cannot be hired because they're not diverse enough or they don't count towards inclusion enough. So I think that that's something that's a difficult topic around that. To get that very clear, what do we mean with that? What is our approach on that? How do we describe it? And then the next step, how do we get this ingrained as a company culture for everyone to be on board with understanding what it means? And it to me, it basically just means accepting each other the way that you are and without any prejudice and just empowering each other, whoever you are in whichever position.
Okay, Helen?
I think a lot of people will say to you, diversity and inclusion is hard in recruitment because you simply don't get the applicants. I've heard that again and again, and people especially talk about it in Women in Technology. And I think if you find yourself saying or thinking that, you should instantly take a step back because it's almost certainly not true. And okay, yes, perhaps there's a wider conversation to have, but I know, for example, that we do get a great deal of female applicants in Spain. Why? Because we have a lot of female developers who are very senior and visible within the company in Spain, and because they go out and do outreach programs in schools, at universities, because that's part of who they are as female developers in technology. And therefore, we're sort of known in that region and we get a lot of applicants. So if you're not getting applicants, I think you need to ask yourself, are you doing those other things that are about opening yourself to the applicants from a more diverse area?
Got it. Oliver, maybe you would like to add to this in terms like For what would be your dream, and what would be the most difficult part of implementing such a dream?
I mean, the first thing I'll say is like from an HR and a recruitment process that I've gone through with PandaScore, it's actually been one of the most, been one of the least confronting and most like open and accepting methodologies that they have, and it's a very, very human process. I mean, they're really like, in terms of a company, it's very, very open, very, very, and very, very accepting, and there's never been any judgment. So I think I can look to what companies, what my current company does. When I worked at Genius as well, and there was, there were challenges for them. I know that they were very similar. What the ideal would be, again, I come back to that point. Again, it's just about making sure it's starting from zero, from a level playing field. Understand, how do you profile people, and how do you understand what that everyone starts from zero. And that's it may be a bit utopian, but that's kind of, I think that's where we should strive for. That would be what I would want. But I can say that, some people do it very well. PandaScore have done it fantastically. Their HR and people kind of practices are brilliant, and they're constantly evolving, and they encourage me to share and me to tell them what my difficulties are and things that I can do, and where I need some help and assistance. And it's a human process. And I think I can't speak highly enough of that.
Okay, thank you. Robin, you work with such things, right?
Yes, of course. Yeah. And I think in order to get started, you have to have a conversation in your organization. But more importantly, you have to realize that actually these programs do cost money, and you need to invest in both your people in regards to training and your partners in regards to the channels you're using to attract more people into your organization. In our organization, we partner with lots of different groups that represent lots of different communities, and that's how we bring in and tell the story of our clients to lots of different people. And because we do that, we get applicants from all different types of backgrounds. We built tech programs that include well north of 50% female participation in regards to software developers. And actually, I don't want to say it wasn't easy, but if you make that your mission and your purpose, and you put some drive and some resources behind it, there's no reason why you can't succeed. So there's got to be the will in order to do so. In order to have the will, you do have to sponsor these programs within your corporate culture.
And another question for everyone: have you seen any resistance in regards to implementing diversity and inclusion? Personally, have you seen any?
Yeah, I think that's, diversity and inclusion is always applauded, but then in reality, of course, once it has to be applied, there's always then there's a different minority of people that may not always see what Oliver is mentioning, to start from zero, to view everyone in the same opinion, starting from zero. And I think that's the part that in reality everyone likes the idea, but to get across the way that everyone will embrace this, the way that it's intended to be applied across the company is of course a second step. I think that it's all about progress. We're considering where we've started to where we are now in all of a lot of industries, and especially in gaming. A lot of progress has been made, and there's always going to be people that need to be convinced a little bit more, or to step outside of their personal reference or personal way of viewing things and of perceiving other candidates. So I think that as I think Helen also mentioned in the beginning, there's also your personal reference and your personal opinions for certain people, and then there is what is expected at work and in work culture, and then the change all around it. I'm not sure exactly how Helen described it. I don't know if she wants to touch back on that topic, but this is what is coming across for me.
I'd just say, look, Robin made the point. As soon as you start asking for budget, people are suddenly slightly less keen on anything, right? So some of the tricks are how you can show a fairly immediate ROI on lowering your recruitment costs and increasing your retention. And as soon as you can do that, then everybody's a fan.
Okay, so any of you guys would like to give some shout out to some programs that have been excelling in this, in the gambling industry?
Well, I'm going to give a shout out to our developer, Naikari, who runs and who goes to schools to work with girls who code, and who is continually asking me for, the kind of sticker sheets and merchandise that we give out at gambling conferences. And I have to make sure that they are utterly suitable for girls who code. But I mean, she does brilliantly. It's not that we said, go set up a diversity program. She said, I'm doing this, by the way. And, let me applaud more people who do that, because they are bringing their whole selves to work, doing the things they care about. And a teeny weeny bit of credit to us goes for supporting her, but it's only small. It's really all to her.
Okay. So as some closing remarks, we will take a 20 minutes break after this. What would a future, let's say, I don't like this type of questions usually, but let's say we're in 2027 and we are still in the gambling industry. I hope we all are. What has changed since 2022? Iris.
What has changed? Well, as I said, I think that we got on a good trend now of, or let's say I described it as a breeze that became a hurricane. Where we're all moving forward in a very positive manner. So I think that I expect this to progress in a good way. So that's my hopes and the beliefs for the future.
Right, Helen.
God, 5 years.
We are in the future now. Imagine, we are in the future.
It passes in a blink of an eye. So look, I hope that I won't be the only woman on our board. I hope it'll be more than just me. I hope that we will be more reflective of the society around us. I hope that our events would have taken on board what Oliver has just said and will have become more accessible to people with disabilities. Very conscious thinking about that, of just how inaccessible they are. I just hope we've got better.
Okay. Oliver.
I don't want to, I suppose, I hope we're better. I hope to see more people not like me, but, I hope to see people more confident in conveying that they have disabilities or they have difficulties. I'd love to see more keynotes from people who have disabilities, or people on panels like this. So I'd like to see more. I just want to see more of. So I don't mean this in an egotistical way. I want to see more of me. I want to see more people like me coming forward and doing this, joining these panels and taking these opportunities and doing these things, and doing it openly, not with a disguise. I think that would be incredible.
Awesome, Robin.
I think if anything, the pandemic has shown us that there's significant opportunities, in as much as there has been significant difficulty in overcoming what we've been through. And I think it's important for organizations to take advantage of those opportunities. The remote working element is both a risk, because you don't have the inclusion at an office that you used to, but you do have the ability to change your hiring practices, which can only be for the better if it's done in the right way. And I think the industry is of course going to be going through some massive growth, and there's going to be, Zoltán, to your point, integration with other very fast-paced industries, including blockchain and crypto and entertainment and so on and so forth. And it's only that by elevating these conversations in this way and others through programs and organizations that we'll see positive change.
Yeah, and if everything is correct, that maybe in 5 years we will be all working in metaverse, and there's some elimination of this type of inclusion. All right. Thank you, panelists. experts, and thank you so much for giving your comments on my questions, and it has been a pleasure to have you here. Look forward to the next catch up. With the conference now, we are going to take a 20 minutes break, and we will be back with the Nordic industry update. Thank you, Iris, Helen, Ollie, Robin. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
Everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye.